a destitute public that will never be granted democratic rights, will not be given civil liberties, will not be given freedom of the press, will not be given. I think what is getting left out of this discussion, especially given my own history, is the significance of the Palestinian issue for the corrupt and tyrannical leaders in the region. You and I have talked about it, but I think it's the one thing that is not within the scope of the conversation. Again, going back to Iran in 1979, 1980, 1981, when so much is going on in Iran. And, by the way, in September of 1980, Saddam Hussein, who used to be the president of Iraq, sees Iran vulnerable and attacks Iran. So, Iran and Iraq share a border. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden you have not just, a country being Iran, having just experienced a massive, seismic revolution and change. And by the way, it's lost all of its diplomatic ties with the United States because, they are keeping 52 American diplomats hostage. Then Saddam Hussein attacks Iran and takes over lots of swaths of land in southern Iran. So what would any normal leader say? Would say, we're going to drive these enemies out of our country and reclaim our land. But that is not what Ayatollah Khomeini says in September of 1980 when Saddam Hussein attacks Iran. Do you know what he says?
No.
He says, we're going to drive out the enemy forces from southern Iran, reclaim our land. Then we're going to march into Baghdad, the capital of Iraq.
Okay, yeah.
And from there, we're going to march to Jerusalem and free Jerusalem.
Good luck with that.
Well, not just good luck with that. And by the way, none of that worked out after nearly 10 years of one of the bloodiest, if not the bloodiest, war in the second half of the 20th century, where, hundreds of thousands of people on both sides were killed and maimed. Not only that didn't work out, and, so much was lost for both nations on both sides, but why would that be a goal? Because the Palestinian issue has become a political issue to manipulate a destitute public that will never be granted democratic rights, will not be given civil liberties, will not be given freedom of the press, will not be given a vision of a future for its youth to look forward to. So these corrupt, tyrannical leaders can continue to plunder their own national resources and remain in power. And Palestine then becomes this thing that they can point to say why they're justified and why they are on the side of, as you said, the downtrodden.
And why democracy doesn't work.
Democracy doesn't work and can't work. And by the way, don't worry about democracy because the Palestinians.
Right.
We can have a democracy, but how can we have a democracy until the Palestinians are freed?
So to answer, there was a question I asked a while ago, and we went on a long tangent. But that question was, do they care more about the fact that these are Jews who are in that land, or do they care more about the fact that that it's a democracy that's been set up that is antithetical to how they rule? And it seems like the answer is they care more about the fact that it's a democracy that's antithetical to how they rule.
Yeah. Because everything that their nations should expect, they should expect to, be able to address the huge environmental threat that's most dire in the Middle East. There's water scarcity in Iran like nothing else anybody is experiencing anywhere. There has been water protests in Iran, especially in the southern parts of Iran. So much of the land in Iran has already become uninhabitable and will become uninhabitable very soon. And what has the Iranian regime done? Completely misused and mismanaged the water resources of the country and given so much of it over to the Chinese, who care nothing about what happens to the land in Iran
Sure.
and whether or not, right?
Iran's a useful idiot for them.
Exactly. And in the meantime, what has Israel done? Desalinization. They have figured out how to recycle water and how to make water that is not potable and turn it into potable water. That's just one example. They have built universities. They have become they've become the other Silicon Valley in the world. And they have democratic rights, and they have free and fair elections. Yes, they sometimes go bonkers and they choose somebody like Netanyahu who's antithetical to the
We've done
democratic
that
future
here
of
too.
Israel.
Yeah, Bush, Cheney were here. Yeah.
Yeah, but that happens in democracies.
Yes.
So
Yes, and I think that's a good point. Like, people are not their governments, and I think we do that too much around the world, where we assume, maybe a government who's not as good gets into power, and then we assume that like all their people support that. Israel's got a lot of parties, so I think Netanyahu wins with like 27% of the vote or something. He's got mass demonstrations in the streets against him to this day.
every Saturday night,
Yeah,
hundreds of
so
thousands show up.
I always defend like the Israeli populace in that way, because they're not, people like to make this black and white in that respect, and they're not supporting what Netanyahu does across many of them. So, it's a particularly bad moment for Israel because of some of the people who are in charge and because of some of the actions that are being taken. And by the way, we shouldn't lose this in the point. A lot of, what's going on in Gaza with indiscriminate killing is bombing and drone strikes, which is particularly, what's the word I'm looking for? Manipulative to me of the leadership to their people, say IDF forces or whatever, because it separates people from the personal nature of killing. It's not the same as, I mean, the end result's the same, but it's not the same as Nazis taking orders and killing people at point blank range, or turning on the gas chamber right in front of them or whatever. It's more depersonalized.
Impersonal.
Right. And so someone takes an order, hey, yeah, I know we're sitting in this shed right now with a remote control. Make sure you hit that building right there that you see on a grainy screen. And then a big thing goes up and you go, oh, wow. And then you find out later, 60 people died. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.